What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, we are beginning our conference previews today. So we're going to start with the ACC. Look, conferences are getting a little bit crazy, so we're going to do the Power Four. If there's, we'll mention the Group of Five team that might sneak in the playoff or will sneak in the playoff here with our national one. But Daniel, excited to dive in to the Atlantic Coast Conference, kind of.
Yeah. Well, this is great. It's good to get these previews started. We got to go in alphabetical order, of course, and we are omitting the independents this year because in the Group of Five, we're just going to lump Notre Dame in with the ACC, call it a
That's
day.
right.
All these conferences are thick with 2 Cs, so we are just going to go through each one and just have a time. It's a great time of year. This is the last month without college football on the calendar. I'm ready, brother.
I am also ready. Let's start with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame, this is year 3 of Marcus Freeman, which is hard to believe, and they've got a tough schedule this year. I would argue Notre Dame has a tough schedule most years, despite what people like to say about their overrated schedule. But Notre Dame with their highest win total in the Marcus Freeman era with 10.5 wins. Riley Leonard coming over from Duke. Daniel, I like Notre Dame to go over under this win total.
What was the win total?
10.5. It's a high number.
It is high. I like it. Okay. I've got a couple of reasons. Riley Leonard, obviously, you just mentioned coming from Duke. That's a big reason. The second year in a row of taking an ACC quarterback, a fifth-year senior last year. Sam Hartman coming from Wake Forest this year. Riley Leonard. Last year it didn't work, I don't think, as well as they would have liked. I also think, Jacob, you remember that whole courting of their offensive coordinator, figuring it out. It didn't mesh well. It seemed like they were unsure and they just settled. They didn't have the money. It was kind of an embarrassing day for Notre Dame. This year things are different. They brought in Mike Denbrock from LSU. Yeah. This offense is going to be humming. I fully believe Riley Leonard, first game against his old coach at Duke, is now at Texas A&M. Now, granted, I think that game is just the most difficult one on the schedule. And it's the first one. You got a mountain to climb, and it's the first game. I think if they lose that game, they can still run the table the rest of the way. And that's what it would take, basically, for them to do that. But I think they could go in there and win. Right now, I think Texas A&M is sitting as a 1-point favorite against Notre Dame in that game. But Al Golden is defensive coordinator coming back. And I really like Denbrock coming in this very first year. Chris Mitchell at wide receiver, Bo Collins, just some good dudes. The offensive line is going to rinse and repeat every year they have guys. They did put some guys in the league. They're going to put some more guys this next year. They only returned 2 starters technically, but I'm in on Notre Dame. I think they'll be balanced. I think that the quarterback running game will be a little bit of a game changer. And obviously with what Denbrock did with Jaden Daniels last year, not saying that that's what Riley Leonard is, but we saw him use his legs in multiple games, notably against Clemson last year, that would win Duke those games. So I am in on them. I think that will transcend what they're trying to do over the course of the season. But yeah, give me Notre Dame. Give me the over. I'm going 11 wins.
Wow. So Notre Dame is the 8th best odds to win the national championship at plus 2,200 right now. I am in. I'll believe it when I see it, Mo, with Notre Dame. I think 11-1 in the Marcus Freeman era. Like, I'll show it to me and I'll hop on the next time. With this schedule, 10-2 is very possible. The defensive line is going to be very, very good. How healthy is Riley Leonard? That's my question. Like, how is he 100% going into week 1? Because, and again, if he gets hurt there, we saw what happened last year when he came back too early from injury and then re-injured it and it got worse. So I'm like, how healthy is he week 1? Because after that, the schedule gets lighter. I mean, your next road games are at Purdue and at Georgia Tech, at Navy. So, I mean, if you get past A&M, the schedule really lightens up. You get Florida State at home, You get 2 USC to end the season, but this is an extremely manageable schedule. But I will go under the win total. I do think 10.5. I'm looking at teams with 10.5 win total, and it's like Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame. That just doesn't seem. I know the schedule's light, but I'll believe it when I see it. I'll go 10-2 for Notre Dame. Still a phenomenal season, and does 10-2 get you in the playoff if you're Notre Dame? We'll see.
You took the question right out of. I was just going to ask you that. I think
I don't know yet.
That's what's going to have to be answered, of course, with how we see what the committee starts doing with all these 10-2 teams that be hanging around. We bet, but
in my head, it's a 10-2 Notre Dame does not get left out. It's Notre Dame, but here's where the argument comes in. Let's just say we'll use another big brand. Let's say Alabama and Georgia face off in the SEC Championship. Alabama is 10-2 going in. They lose. Alabama is now 10-3. Notre Dame is 10-2. Alabama was ranked 6 going in. Notre Dame was ranked 9. Alabama loses by 3 in the SEC Championship game. It's now 10-3. Like, that's the kind of stuff the committee's going to have to deal with, and that's tough to punish a team for losing a conference championship game when one team was sitting at home. So I think it depends. Off the top of my head, I think a 10-2 Notre Dame is in, but I'll have to see how the rest of our previews go.
Absolutely.
Let's jump into the ACC. Boston College, Daniel, is sitting at 4.5 on their win total. New coaching staff coming in after Jeff Hafley is off to the NFL. Bill O'Brien comes in. 4.5, pretty low win total. You going over or under this win total?
Yeah, surprisingly, 4.5 sounds like a little bit, but you look at their schedule. I mean, Duquesne seems like a win, but non-conference schedule at Missouri, they're not winning that game. That's a very good team. Michigan State, who
very losable,
that's Jonathan Smith,
right?
Guy we love. We're going to get into the Big Ten in a few weeks.
Blue collar.
I mean, Western Kentucky is no picnic. I just don't, and I haven't mentioned the ACC games because they start at Florida State, which is not going to be easy.
Right.
And you just start sizing up this schedule. I think Syracuse, we'll get to them in a minute. I like Syracuse a lot more this year with Fran Brown in that lead role and Kyle McCord at quarterback. So I'm going under. I think Boston College under.
I'm also going under. That schedule is just way too brutal. Missouri and Michigan State out of conference. No thanks. I think those are both losses, and you play enough of the good teams in the ACC. I mean, you get Florida State, you get UNC, you get Louisville, you get Virginia Tech. That's a hill too high to climb for me. I'll go under for Boston College. Their first season in the Atlantic Coast Conference while sitting on a bay on the Pacific Ocean. The California Golden Bears, 6.5 wins, expected to make a bowl game according to Las Vegas in their first season in the ACC. The schedule also has a road trip to Auburn, home game against San Diego State. Not easy games out of conference. Over or under 6.5 on the Bears, Daniel?
Yeah, 6.5. I mean, Jaden Ott is special, but I don't know if he's special enough to will them to more than 6 wins. I think they'd be happy to get to 6 wins. They play at Auburn, at Florida State. They have several tough road games. They play Oregon State out of conference, which is weird to say.
Yeah, very weird.
It's just one of those things. Jaden Ott at, I think at running back, he's a stud, potential Sunday guy. That's kind of where it ends for me with them. So I'm going to go under. They went 6-7 last year, 6.5. I think they make a bowl game. They'd be happy. I think getting to 6 wins would be an accomplishment first year in the ACC. That's a lot of travel. 24,900 miles around the world, 24,000 miles for 5 ACC road games. I think our friend of the show, Josh Pate, put that out there. That's insane. So the travel will get to these players. I think it's going to affect the newcomers on the West Coast a little more than it will the ACC folks that are going out there for a game or two.
I was going to go over. and say the schedule is very manageable for an ACC schedule, but I forgot the travel stat. I'm going to go under now because I'm looking at wins and losses, and I'm like, at Wake Forest, I'd favor Cal. At Pitt, I think I'd favor Cal, and I'm like, you're losing one of those two games. Like that. That's so much travel. Like, yeah, a sleepy noon kickoff at Wake Forest. That has a loss written, dude. Against Dave Clawson, that's got a loss written all over it, dude. Yeah, those two coaches too, Narduzzi and Clawson. You think they're walking into those half-filled stadiums and taking a win at noon? No thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go under for Cal as well, simply based on that. The Clemson Tigers tied for the highest win total in the ACC with 9.5. They're coming off of they got double-digit wins last year with the bowl game win, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they did. I'm like, because they had that streak of double-digit wins. But
Or
Clemson.
No. They won 9. They went 9-4 total.
Okay, so they did break the streak last year. That's right. So Clemson, not the Clemson of the early playoff era, but still Clemson, still playing as a tier 1, tier 2 program in the ACC, and not as well last year. Still made this the big hire with Garrett Riley. Hire Matt Luke for the offensive line this year. Still not taking any transfers. I mean, can Clemson get out of this hole and change people's minds that they can still win Dabo's way? And a 9.5, if I didn't say.
It's a loaded question. You said 9.5.
Yeah.
It's a loaded question. There's a lot of philosophical thoughts that I have about Clemson, Florida State, who's doing what right. They're completely different cultures, but they're both good, healthy cultures. I think both coaches obviously are great. So you can't look at one without judging it versus the other. We're going to get to Florida State in a minute, but did Florida State officially take back over the ACC, and is this just Florida State's reign? Where does Miami play into this? We'll get to them in just a second. But Clemson, Jacob, you called it. You called your shot. Back when Trevor Lawrence left and they handed it over to DJU, and you were just like, it's just not that easy to hand off to this guy that everybody's crowning as the next one. You got to look at the offensive line recruiting. You've got to take all of these things into account. This is year 2 of Matt Luke being their offensive line coach. I do think they're turning a corner. I think you're going to see some real change on the offensive line. I think Blake Miller, all ACC tackle. You've got to start to consider there is an upswing. I'm looking at this schedule, Jacob. Obviously, they play Georgia in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I don't think anybody expects them to win that game. They're going to be playing with house money. It's a noon kickoff. They might catch Georgia napping. Who knows? They've done that before to people. Then the rest of the schedule, looking at it, they could be favored in every other game. They do play at Florida State in week 5. That being said, if Florida State has dropped an early game or two, they could be favored. So that's just something to consider. There's no Will Shipley. That really kind of became their identity on offense the past few years. And when he was out, it was noticeable. Phil Maffa has played a lot at running back. I think he's a very solid starter in the ACC. I don't think he's necessarily spectacular, but he gets tough yards. A lot of times you see a big jump in year 2 of a system for offensive coordinators. So Garrett Riley, there's a lot expected here between him and Cade Klubnik, the quarterback. This is a show me year. I've gone through it a few times. TJ Moore coming in, 5-star freshman. Barrett Carter coming back for his senior year, as well as Sammy Brown coming in, 5-star freshman at inside backer. I think their defense is going to be special. I'm going over. I think this is a 10-win team. I think they're playing in the ACC Championship, and for all intents and purposes, they have returned to their form in the ACC prior, other than their elite years with Trevor Lawrence and all those NFL draft picks. I think that they can kind of reestablish themselves a good floor and get back to that 10-win streak this year, and it happens. So give me the over. I like them to kind of bounce back. Interested to see what Cade Klubnik does.
9.5 is the perfect number. They do play their 3 toughest games away from Clemson. So, of course, that Georgia game is a neutral site in Atlanta. That'll probably be a I mean, that'll be close to 50-50 split. I mean, Clemson's not far from Athens, and a lot of Clemson alums here in Atlanta. But like you said, I mean, that spread on that game is 2 touchdowns. No one's expecting them to be in that game. So can they go one loss the rest of the way with road games at Florida State, at Virginia Tech? I just don't think so. I need to see it. The offensive line has still like not recruited well enough for Clemson. Like, and here's the thing: if Dabo just wants to be like, I want to develop men, which he does, and like love my job and live in Clemson, South Carolina, then like going 9-3 is awesome, and you can keep doing what you're doing, take no transfers, develop men, whatever. But from what I've seen, that is not what Clemson fans' expectations are now that they've seen the mountaintop. It's the whole, Josh Pate talks about this, where it's the oh gosh, like the price of success. I forget what exactly he calls it, but it's the price you pay for having success. Clemson has paid that with everyone criticizing them the past few years because they've been at the mountaintop, and everyone's comparing what does this Clemson team look like compared to the 2018 team that went undefeated with Trevor Lawrence, the 2016 team that took down Alabama, the 2015 team that probably should have taken down Alabama and gone undefeated that year. So, the 2019 team that took down Justin Fields in Ohio State and came up just short against LSU in the national championship. So this Clemson team is not those teams. Everyone else in the ACC is playing well enough where NC State is not a chalked up win on this schedule. Virginia Tech on the road is for sure not a chalked up win. Louisville is not a chalked up win, but in 2018, all these games would have been absolutely like you're riding in wins, and at Florida State, you're like, that's like a 75% win at that
Right.
point. Like,
Yeah.
you're looking at the schedule and saying 11-1, even with Georgia on the schedule, at worst, like 10-2 would be the bottom fill out. And I'm sitting here with a win total at 9.5 and saying, I'll believe it when I see it, 9-3. I'll believe it gets better when I see it. And if I'm wrong about it, I'll be wrong about it. But I will bet safely on being wrong. Like I'll bet safely on the under, and then be surprised when I'm wrong. Until I see it. So
it's like, Jacob, you were ahead of the time talking about the reality has changed. Perception was still the same. Perception has officially shifted alongside that reality from that 2021, 2022
right.
time. And we
finally,
it's just crazy because it was like people didn't want to believe it. And then they started seeing it. Oh, they did lose to NC State. Oh, they did lose this, and so they lost to Miami last year. The Miami team everybody was laughing at, they lost in overtime to Miami. So
that's right.
Something to keep in mind. It's a mental fortitude thing. They keep having these 5-star quarterbacks, and people think that they're going to spin gold, be the next Trevor Lawrence. There's only been one Trevor Lawrence so far. So
far, yeah.
So far that I know. So
right. No, I mean, that's a once-in-a-decade player you had. You kind of had 2 once-in-a-decade quarterbacks back-to-back. So I'll go under for Clemson, under 9.5. And I do not have them playing for the ACC Championship. Not in the game this year for me. Duke, their over-under win total is 5.5. Of course, you'll lose Mike Elko after an unbelievable year with him last year. New coaching staff in, win total back down at 5.5. Where are you going with the Blue Devils?
They've got Manny Diaz coming in as a head coach. I like that. Him getting another shot after I feel like he got shortchanged in Miami. Went to Temple now, obviously, or I guess was the DC, and then came at Penn State. Then came now to Duke. He was at Temple for a second, and they called him back to Miami. That's what I was thinking about. But Malik Murphy coming in from Texas at quarterback, got to have somebody to replace Riley Leonard. There's a ton of expectation for Malik Murphy, or there was all that potential coming out of high school. A lot of people were talking about how Arch Manning was the 3rd quarterback at Texas behind Malik Murphy. So him transferring over to Duke, I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. Looking at the schedule, Jacob, 5.5 doesn't seem very hard for them to reach 5 wins. They play Elon at Northwestern, UConn at home, at Middle Tennessee, and then they've got their ACC schedule. So I was looking at it, counting through wins, trying to be conservative. I think their ceiling is 8 wins, but I think their floor is 6 wins. So I'm going over. I think that they can win 7 games this year. I think 7-5 would be a tremendous first year for Manny Diaz, and it would make Duke fans feel like, hey, we still have a football program to be proud of. And, I think there's enough juice there with Malik Murphy wanting to prove himself and show he can do things on his own, and really have his opportunity to be the guy. So, yeah, give me over on the Duke.
A floor of 6 wins makes me very curious here, and we'll get there. Your opinion on Georgia Tech and SMU. Because looking at the schedule, if you're going to get over, I think you need to get to 5 wins before the bye week. Before the bye, they have Elon at Northwestern playing on like a practice field there at Northwestern. UConn at Middle Tennessee State, weird road game. North Carolina at home, at Georgia Tech bye week. I think you got to get to 5 wins before that bye week, because after the bye, I mean, it is such a backloaded schedule. I mean, Florida State, SMU, Miami, NC State, Virginia Tech, and then it's like you end on a high note with at Wake Forest, which, again, when you're Duke, at Wake Forest is not some walk in the park going up
Right.
against the Dave Clawson coach team. So I'm going to go under. I just think the schedule is really, really tough for a new coaching staff, and it's so backloaded. That's such a tough rhythm to get in. I'll go under for Duke. I do like Malik Murphy. I like bringing him in, but don't love the returning production. New coaching staff, backloaded schedule. I'll go under that 5.5. Florida State, ACC champs, 13-1 last year, 13-0 before getting left out of the playoff. Unfortunately, you and I were still upset about that. Thought they made the wrong call there, but that will not happen in the 12-team era, at least. But Florida State, 9.5, tied for the highest win total in the ACC. Can they continue their upward trajectory? Are they going over and under 9.5 wins?
Yeah, I really want to, which I think I did. Did I sell them in our our buying and selling? I think I sold Florida State.
I think you did.
The more I've looked into it, the more I like them. I'm still selling them on the record. But Florida State, okay, DJ Uiagalelei is going to get a lot of headlines. I think if he gets hurt, they are in trouble at quarterback. So not obviously not wishing anything like that on anybody. Most most teams, if their quarterback gets hurt, they're in trouble. But I think that they become very one dimensional, and it turns into kind of an ugly game. But that being said, they have replaced a lot of talent. This offensive line has 190 starts between them at the at the FBS level, 123 at Florida State. So these are guys who have been here. They bring in TJ Ferguson from Alabama at guard. I think that's big. And I think that the offensive line, Jacob, you remember at the beginning of the, I guess, Willie Taggart era, end of the Jimbo Fisher era, that was just kind of the running thing. There was the worst offensive line you could think of, and it was always Florida State. So this unit, compared to what the perception was 7 years ago, even 3 years ago, is completely different. This team is ready to win at the line of scrimmage. So I think that's big. Keziah Holmes and Lawrence Toafili at running back, I think is a good 1-2 punch. They also bring in Roydell Williams from Alabama, which I think is huge. So they've got kind of a 3-headed monster of backs to take over for Trey Benson from him going pro. I'm looking at this schedule though. They're starting in Dublin versus Georgia Tech. They are better than Georgia Tech. This is not me trying to do some sort of, but that game is going to be tougher than they want it to be. And they're going to go out there, and the travel, both teams have to travel. I think Georgia Tech's going to give them a little bit of a game. Defensively, they got several transfers as well. They're going to be a good defensive team. But going through this schedule, I mean, Boston College, Memphis, SMU, Clemson, they get Clemson at home. I expect Florida State to really, even if they're not as good as last year, which would be ridiculous to assume that they're going to be as good as last year with all those great players and going 13-0 in the regular season and the winning the ACC. I still think that they can be not as good and still have a very good record. They could be 11-1 this year with me selling them and them, so that's kind of where I'm at with them. I'm looking through, I think that they could lose more than that, but looking through the schedule is not very tough. It's manageable. They get 2 bye weeks because they're playing the week 0 game.
They get 3 bye weeks.
3 bye weeks. That's right. Because everybody gets 2 bye weeks. So 3 bye weeks. So that's something to consider as well. They get, like I said, Clemson at home is a big deal. They do play at Notre Dame, but get to play Charleston Southern right before they play Florida. So Florida's probably going to have a new head coach by the time Florida State gets to play them as well. So, that may be just a romping in and of itself. So I'm going to go over. I'm going to give them 11-1, even though I sold them a couple weeks ago with David Cobb on here in front of everybody. Florida State will still be good. I was selling them based on the perception from last year to this year. So anyways.
Yeah, I'm going over. I'm not quite as high as you, but 10-2 to me seems like the most likely outcome. My secret sauce was 3 bye weeks. I mean, like with a not a difficult schedule, but you get 3 bye weeks. I mean, you break up the schedule into 2 games bye week, 4 games bye week, 4 games bye week, and then you get your last 2, and then you get the ACC Championship. So I do have Florida State playing for the ACC Championship, 10-2, and only taking 1 loss in conference. For me, I think they lose an out-of-conference game as well, either to Florida or Notre Dame. They get Memphis, who is also, vying for a playoff spot from the Group of 5. So they're one of the best Group of 5 teams this year.
It's a Mike Norvell game right there.
That's right. So not an easy by any means out of conference schedule, but even with a not as good quarterback and what you lost last year, I still think they return enough to bring back a team, and they've got the culture in place. They took some more transfers. I mean, their pass rush is going to be one of the best in the country. You bring in Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia to add to that pass rush, just like you did with Verse, and you've done it with Jermaine Johnson at this point too. So bringing in transfers and getting the most out of them, and Norvell's doing that. So I like Florida State to go 10-2 and play for the ACC Championship. All right, Georgia
Put me
Tech.
down officially for 10-2 as well. I feel crazy selling them and then saying 11-1. I'm gonna sleep better at night putting them at 10-2. So we're both on the same train there.
There you go. So Georgia Tech coming in with an over/under win total of 5.5 in Brent Key's second year. The way they handled last season was very impressive for the Yellow Jackets. Where are you going with Georgia Tech?
Yeah, they were one of the teams I bought last year. I was big on them making a leap. They're returning the ACC leader in explosive plays in Haynes King.
And interceptions.
And they're turnovers. He's number 1 in turnovers. I think he was number 2 in interceptions. He's number 1 in turnovers. He certainly is exciting. If he's ever got the ball in his hands, it's going to be a big play one way or the other. So if he can limit those, which is famous last words for every quarterback, it seems, if he can somehow limit that and maximize this offense, I mean, they are an explosive offense waiting to happen with co-offensive coordinators, Buster Faulkner, Chris Weinke. This offensive line is the pride of Brent Key. They've got 4 returning starters, including all ACC, all conference, Jordan Williams at right tackle. I think he's a Sunday player. They've made change at defensive coordinator. I think that they're going to make several steps up here. On the defensive side of the ball, they've received some transfers in. I expect them to kind of do what they've been doing. And say what you will about Brent Key, the team plays hard for him. I am curious if there's going to be a fatigue that you're kind of seeing. I kind of liken it to Arkansas. Arkansas brought in Sam Pittman, O-line guy who loved Arkansas, was all about them. Everybody fell in love with him. He had a good second year. And then now he's on the hot seat because he's had a couple of duds. So I I'm not trying to jump to that with Brent Key, but it's similar situation. I think there's going to be a love fest. I think they have a good year this year. I'm not sure how this is going to continue to go, considering that they have to keep playing Georgia every year at the end of the year. And for Georgia Tech, that's just their biggest game. And I do like that Brent Key has called that out and said, this is very important to me. I hate that team. I'm thinking 365 days a year about beating that team. So offensively, they return 8 guys. Jamal Haynes in the backfield. Haynes King, obviously at QB. Great offensive line. Eric Singleton Jr., who was a phenomenal freshman last year at receiver. Expect big things out of him again. So what do we have, 6.5? Or was it?
5.5.
5.5. Give me the over. I'm going to take 6 wins. I'm going to have to siphon out and figure out where they are. They play Georgia State. Georgia State's going to give them everything they can, respectfully. At Syracuse isn't easy. VMI, they should win. But they're going to find some wins that they shouldn't have in the ACC, and that's just the facts. That's kind of how, the whole conference is now the ACC Coastal, in my opinion. Everybody can kind of beat anybody. There's no, Clemson and Florida State are even both beatable. So, I don't look at this and worry. And Clemson, Georgia Tech actually doesn't play Clemson this year for the first time in a long time. So that kind of lightens things up a little bit for them. They do, of course, pick up Florida State in Dublin. So not necessarily a cakewalk, but we'll see. Give me 6 wins for Georgia Tech. I'm taking the over.
What do you think the point spread is on Florida State game?
I don't know, 14.
Yeah. I mean, it's 2 touchdowns. I'm going under. Georgia Tech did not pony up and pay at least 2 of the coaches they wanted, who turned down the job. They probably lucked out with a really good football coach. I'm wondering if Georgia Tech's serious about football. And in the new ACC, where the Coastal was easier than their path now to, I think an ACC championship is way out of the question at this point for Georgia Tech, with the Coastal being gone. But also, what are you doing scheduling Georgia State? You are asking.
You're asking for it. Yeah.
You're asking for it. Let me tell you something. As soon as Kirby Smart got to Georgia, you think they're ever going to schedule Georgia Southern or Georgia State? Absolutely not. They're never scheduling those teams because you're asking for it. Go schedule Tennessee State and South Carolina State. You don't schedule Georgia State in your city with Del McGee on the other side.
Del McGee is coming in now. Yeah, it was not wise.
You're asking for it. After coming back from Ireland, that's just...
Yeah, they don't even have the bye week yet.
No.
They're coming straight home to play that game.
And then you go to Syracuse. You're playing 3 Georgia coaches this year on your schedule. They go to Louisville, to North Carolina. They're playing Notre Dame in Mercedes-Benz, which is going to give them a home crowd. You go to Athens. Miami's on the schedule. This is a tough at Virginia Tech, I think I already said. This is a tough schedule. They have one of the more difficult schedules in the country. They might be a better football team and be 5-7 and miss a bowl game this year, which is what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to be a better football team and have a worse record, which is just, that's how it falls sometimes, which stinks. So I'll go under on Georgia Tech. Jeff Brom, year 2, played for the ACC Championship last year. They've got a win total of 8.5 coming into this season. Where are you going on the Cardinals?
Yeah, I've got a problem. I feel like I just always seem to lowball Louisville and Jeff Brom, but I definitely did last year. I didn't think that they could do what they did, even with that great schedule. This year, I'm interested to see how things shake out as well. Where was their win total? 8.5?
8.5, yep.
8.5. That's just a lot of wins. They're trotting out Tyler Shupp, who's like
8th year of college football.
Yeah, couldn't win it at Oregon, was in and out. When he played at Texas Tech was pretty good, but he's always been injured. I just don't. It's not all about the quarterback. They've got a good pass rush. I think that there's definitely some, Ashton Gillett and like some guys that are going to be in the NFL on this team. I try to consider that. 8.5 is a ton of wins. So I'm going under. I think 7 or 8 wins is a lot more likely. They do have a pretty favorable schedule, but dude, who knows? I mean, who knows?
Jeff Brom hater.
Noted hater.
I'm
think
going
so.
over.
I think I hate him, and I don't even mean to hate him. I think that's what's going on.
I'm going over. They did a really good job with the transfer portal again this offseason. The schedule is more difficult than last year, but still not crazy. I don't know who they shook hands with in the ACC to keep getting these draws, but still not a bad schedule in the ACC. 8.5. This just seems like a 9-3 team again. And I say again, they were 10-2 last year. So let's take a step back and go 9-3. Still go over the win total. I like it. Jeff Brom over the win total. Brings us to Miami. Miami also with 9.5 on the win total in that tier 1 in the ACC as far as out. I almost said Las Vegas is concerned. So, right now, 9.5 wins for Miami. Is this year 3? Yeah, this is year 3 of Cristobal.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. Do they finally figure it out, Daniel? Over or under 9.5 wins?
9.5, man. Like, what are they doing to us? Jacob, you and we talked about this with David. We've all randomly bought stock in them at different times.
It's hard not to.
Well, they had Derek King a few years ago. Tyler Van Dyke was supposed to just be
supposed to.
They all, and against Georgia Tech last year, just take a knee. They're tired of hearing about that. They did beat Clemson in overtime. They did have some big moments. They ended with 7 wins, losing to Rutgers in the bowl game. I mean, that loss to Georgia Tech really derailed their season. They were 4-0, and then they lost that game. I forgot going into this, when we started looking them up, I was like, I didn't realize how highly we probably were starting to think about Miami. Cam Ward coming in can't be understated. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback. It's enticing. Damian Martinez coming from Oregon State at running back, bringing in Sam Brown at receiver from Houston. I think that they've got some stuff, but they're starting at Florida in the swamp at 3:30. Billy Napier's coaching for his job. And I don't know if they're going to win that game. And you kind of start going through it. 9.5, dude. Florida A&M, Ball State, they can win those. At South Florida. South Florida wants a piece. They're going to give them a tough game just by sheer want to and desire. I'm looking through the schedule, man, and they do miss Clemson, but they obviously play Florida State. At Syracuse at the end of the year is not going to be easy. I feel like it's crazy that if I say they win 9 games, which seems like I'm buying them, I still am going under. But I'm going under. That's just insane for me to say they're going to win 10 games. I can't do it. I have to see it. I've bought them too much on nothing before. So we'll see. I'm going under, though.
You're right. I need to see it to believe it. But here's what I have seen. I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud. It's the best roster in the ACC, Daniel. It's the best roster in the ACC.
It's the best collection of players.
Yes.
On a roster in the ACC.
Yes.
I mean, they've got the best quarterback in the ACC. Am I missing somebody?
I'll say at least compared to Klubnik and DJU.
I think there's guys that would take over them
Klubnik
probably, but yeah.
So 10-2 and in the ACC Championship. Let's move on before I change my mind. Go over
ACC Championship. Oh my God. Okay.
Something they have not done. I don't even think they've played for it since they joined the ACC. And if you remember, you and I have talked about this.
No, they played for it, didn't they? In Mark Rick's like second to last year.
That's right. That's right. And they
That was the
lost.
one time they played for it, and then they got just destroyed.
They started 10-0 and lost 4 games
Like
in a
their
row
last
after
4
that.
games. Yeah.
Yep. I remember 2018. So you and I have talked about this, that when Florida State and Miami joined from the Big East, they put them in different divisions so that they would meet in the ACC Championship, and then they never ever have. I think it finally happened this year. Miami and
Well,
Florida State,
point of clarity.
or Independent and Big East,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
The two teams that came from the Big East at the time were Virginia Tech and Miami, but the idea was put Miami opposite of Florida State,
Right.
who was obviously already in there.
Right.
But yeah, because, oh man. And I guess you could throw Boston College in. I think they joined around that time as well. So, but regardless, yeah, it's so pompous that they were saying, oh yeah, these teams will always meet. And yeah, it would either be, oh yeah, it's going to be Virginia Tech and Miami that are going to rotate for the Coastal, and they're going to play Florida State every year. And it just was not so.
Was not so. Let's go to Louisville. Or no, sorry, wrong team. NC State, another red helmet. NC State sitting at 8.5 wins on the win total. I feel like they've been right about there for the last 8 years or so. Are you going over or under for NC State?
8.5 feels high. They play Tennessee. Don't overlook Western Carolina. Shout out Catamounts. Shout out my cousin James. They play my brother from another mother, Thomas Hammock, and the Northern Illinois, I don't know what they are. The Wolves, I think.
Gosh. Yeah. Sure.
I think they're the Wolves. 8.5. They've got Grayson McCall coming in at quarterback, Coastal Carolina. I guess, did he go to Liberty for a minute? No. I think he flirted with it. He just comes from Coastal Carolina. Anyways, I think he'll be a great quarterback for them. I think they're going to have a good season. Bro, 8.5. I think that the ACC just going to kind of cannibalize itself. They're going to lose. They're going to beat up on each other. I'm going under. 7-8 wins feels about right for NC State.
See, I'm in that 8-9 win range. I like Dave Doran. There's a few coaches over here in the ACC that I'm just like, man, they're tough to play. And he again and again and again overachieves with the roster. And therefore, there's just a few coaches I just believe in. Dave Doran's one of them. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. Give me over for NC State. I think 9-3 on the cards here for NC State. Staying in North Carolina, UNC, 7.5 wins, their win total. Mac Brown, don't know how long he has left, but 7.5 seems like a better win total than what they've been given the past couple of years. A little more realistic. Where are you going for UNC?
Was that a death sentence? You don't know how long he has left. It sounded like it was your
retirement sentence.
He does say that he wants to retire there, which is obvious because he's ancient.
I don't think anyone else is going to hire him.
This point, there's no way. Not the way things have gone, and he's underachieved with NFL quarterbacks. That's really where it comes down to. It's tough for me to look at this. I mean, they do have Max Johnson. I didn't realize this as a backup quarterback transferring in. So worst case, they end up with pretty spicy backup. But it looks like Connor Harrell is going to be the guy. Dude, where are they at? 7.5 wins?
7.5.
Okay. Thank goodness. 8.5 is a slam dunk under. But 7.5, James Madison's going to be tough. At Minnesota is going to be tough. The ACC has already not been kind to them. They lost to Georgia Tech last year with Drake May. I'm going under. I feel like I would go under potentially at 6.5, but 7.5 definitely under.
Man, these lines are pretty good, Daniel. I don't think any of these have been like atrocious so far. Man, I'm sitting here right at that. I'm going to go under 2. I'm sitting right at 7 for them.
You hate him. Come on, man. Just say under. I'm just kidding. You're sick of Matt Brown. You love those colors, and he's just squandering those great colors.
I mean, what do you took me to say? You had Drake May and you went like 7-5. So I just, what are you going to do without him? Yeah, 7-5 seems like UNC's like start 6-0, be all excited, and then get ready for basketball season. So 7-5 for North Carolina. Let's go to Pitt. Narduzzi, good old Narduzzi, sitting with a win total at 5.5. You going? Oh, this is an ACC champion, Pitt Panthers. Not too far removed.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, one total at 5.5. Where are you going with Pitt?
Jacob, they won 3 games last year. There's a lot of L's on that schedule.
A lot of L's.
One of them was to Cincinnati. They have to play at Cincinnati this year. You know, the Nard Dog loves himself some physical football. I think that's what he's going to try to do this year, but he's only got 2 guys returning on that defense. He's got some road graders on the offensive line coming back. I'm interested to see if they're going to be able to sustain, some offense, keep the defense off the field. They're going to need to do that. As the ACC waters rise, it's just tough. You said it's 5.5, right?
5.5.
So they can go 5-7 and be an improvement from last year and still be under, which is what I think they're going to do. So give me the under. They're not going to be atrocious. They're probably going to beat some of the newcomers. They play Cal coming into town this year, and they play at SMU. So we'll see how things go. But yeah, they're not the Kenny Pickett led Pitt Panthers. So it's gonna be a little bit better than last year, but they're not quite up to the previous standard.
Yeah, under. Selling all my Narduzzi stock. As soon as he was mad at his offensive coordinator who led him to an ACC championship and a first-round draft pick at quarterback. I'm
Ridiculous.
like, you're mad at that? All right. Completely out. Sell all my stock. Under. Moving on. Not worth my breath. SMU, newcomer to the conference and coming in with a 7.5 win total. Some people expecting a dark horse in the ACC to be SMU. Daniel, where are you going with the Stangs?
I mean, my ponies. I've always loved them.
That's right. That's right.
I grew up Methodist, unrelated. This team, I'm interested to see how some of these guys, at receiver play, and I think that they are sneaky deep at receiver. They just have some guys who haven't played a whole lot here. They've got a couple Miami transfers at skill position players, so that's something to kind of keep in mind. They finished the year pretty strong last year with the schedule that they did have.
Right.
It's different in the ACC. That being said, they still have some teams on there that they played last year, like TCU. They lost to TCU. They get them at home this year. They have to play Florida State. They miss Clemson, though, so that's good. They do play at Louisville. Luckily, they get to play Houston Christian at home, so that's nice. Kind of quantifying a little bit of this, though. Where are we at? 6.5? What was the win total?
7.5 for
7.5.
Yep.
Do I see 8 wins on this schedule? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, that's a great line. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go over. They're, as Genuine would say, my ponies. All right, I'm going over with the SMU Mustangs. Preston Stone at QB, Jalen Knighton in the backfield, Romello Brinson out wide, Jake Bailey out wide. They got some guys that can do some things. We'll see if they can play defense, but the whole ACC is down on defense in general. They're not going to be world beaters. They're not going to beat the Florida States, Clemsons, all those of the world, but they can hang with the middle of the pack. So give me 8 wins for the Stangs.
Over. Yeah, I'm with you. Pony up. I like them to come in and be not a tier 1, but a tier 2 team in the ACC immediately. So give me over for SMU as well. Another newcomer, Stanford, once again playing on the Bay on the Pacific Ocean and playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference, but nonetheless, they come in with a win total this year at my page reloaded. Give it 2 seconds. I'm going to guess that it's 5.5 as it's loading. Give me another second. Here we go. Pulling up. We are scrolling, killing time, and
This is
great podcasting.
world class podcasting
Oh
at
my
its
god. Oh
finest.
my god. 3.5 wins, not five
That's
and a
what I
half.
guessed.
There you
Yes,
go.
I guessed
Three
three
and
and
a
a half.
half. You got it.
They won 3 games last year. They lose Benjamin Urasek, obviously their stud tight end. He goes to Georgia. Um, this schedule is tougher than what they played last year, and they're traveling a bunch. They're playing in New York against Syracuse. So, I mean, opposite side of the world, it feels. Uh, Definitely that's going to factor in. We're going to see how much these teams really want to be playing football. They are returning 9 starters on offense, 7 on defense. So they won 3 games last year. Maybe they'll be slightly better than they were last year. But again, tougher schedule. I'm going to go under the 3.5. Just I feel like I'm being safe here with. I think most teams on their schedule are circling Stanford as a win, and they're counting on it. So yeah, they're going to probably be um, not favored, but they're going to be the underdog in almost every game that they play. So short of maybe Cal Poly and at San Jose State, depending upon how the ACC schedule goes. So, anyways, under.
I'm also going under. Again, does Stanford want to play football at all as a program? We'll see. But Cal is definitely the best of those two programs right now. Team with a new head coach, Syracuse. Their win total is at 7.5, so definitely expected to make a bowl in year one under Fran Brown. But Daniel going over under the 7.5 win total for Syracuse.
Yeah, I think the national media is definitely caught on to the energy Fran Brown is bringing to this team. The recruiting, obviously the portal. They brought in Kyle McCord, Ohio State's quarterback last year, is now going to be their new QB1. I think that's big because just having a guy that can competently play at a high level, a lot of people downgrade him at Ohio State, but dude, for Syracuse, he's a great QB. So
Yep.
more than capable. And they've returned 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, which is huge. Defensively, they've got a strong secondary, which is obviously Fran Brown's specialty. He's from the Northeast. He's going to recruit that area well. He knows it well. He learned under the best coach in college football, under Kirby Smart at UGA. So I have full confidence that he's going to be able to get this thing turned around pretty quickly. They had 6 wins last year. A lot of times, rule of thumb is year one, you take a little bit of a step back before you take a step forward, but I think they've improved their team and they could take a small step forward even with this schedule, with this new head coach and everything like that. So I think the energy, the vibes are going to be very high. They get to play Ohio, Holy Cross, Stanford. A lot of these games are at home. They can kind of get on a little bit of a run to kind of open the season. They don't play Clemson or Florida State. So, yeah, I was surprised. I thought they still played one of them, and they don't have to play Miami till the very last game of the year. So, yeah, give me the over. I feel more confident after looking at that schedule again.
Manageable schedule. Their road games are at UNLV, at Boston College, at NC State, at Pitt, at Cal. So NC State being the toughest one of those. Yeah, I like this going over. 8-4 seems like a very likely and a very impressive year one for Fran Brown and Syracuse in 2024. Let's go to Virginia. So Virginia sitting at a 4.5 win total. Daniel, where are you going with the Cavaliers in 2024?
Yeah. Where are we at with it? What was the win total? I'm sorry.
4.5.
4.5. Try to be quick with it. They are not going to go over 4.5. They're going to be probably right around 4 wins. Same reasons for everything as kind of Stanford. A lot of teams are circling Virginia as this is a team we need to beat. Yeah, it's going to be a tough season. Is this third year for Tony Elliott?
Yeah, and of course he had the year where I mean, unfortunately, you had some off the field stuff happen where they had to cancel games, and
Of course.
I mean, it sucks. But for this season, I'm with you on going under. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not a big believer in Tony Elliott as head coach. I know he's handled that situation off the field extremely well, and again, don't it sucks for any coach to have to deal with something like that. But as far as on the field performance this season, you said 4 wins, Daniel. This is the kind of schedule where if you're Virginia, you need to schedule for just like cupcakes
Layups.
in the non-conference.
Yeah.
And what are you doing scheduling Maryland at Coastal Carolina? Of course, you get Notre Dame. It's out of your control, but what are we doing here?
I mean, even Richmond, they're going to want a piece, dude. You schedule them from Southeast Louisiana, someone who doesn't even know who you
Exactly.
are.
Right.
You're scheduling these kids who you told no, you know? So
Exactly. Let's go to Virginia Tech, same state, way different win total, 8.5 for Virginia Tech. A lot of people circling this team as the dark horse in the ACC. I think rightfully so. This is the team that ranks number 1 in the country for returning production for Bill Connolly's rankings. Over under 8.5, Daniel.
yeah, Jacob, it's palpable. I can feel your vibes on them. And you know what it is? I know what it is. You know what I'm going to say. They fixed their uniforms.
They're about to. Have they announced it yet?
Oh, I thought that you announced it to me like 3 weeks ago.
So they have not showed them yet, but that's what I meant. They haven't shown them yet, but
Okay.
a lot of okay.
If
July 12th,
they
before the
fix
end of this
uniforms,
week. Before the
it's
end
a
of this week,
lock,
they'll be
the over.
fixed.
I mean, slam dunk the over if they fix the uniforms. 11 returning starters on offense. You already talking about the SP plus returning production. 11 returning starters on offense, 8 returning starters on defense. It's palpable. Brent Pry, in his 2 years at the school, just a little bit under 500. This is a year where he can really take a big step forward. Last year, 7-6. This year, they have Clemson at home. They don't play Florida State, and then they do play at Miami. So at Vanderbilt in the non-con to start the year, play Marshall, Old Dominion. They can kind of get a runway of some wins before they play at Miami. I'm high on them for vibes purposes. 8.5 seems high. The schedule, though, I think that 9 wins, that's all I have to get them to. 9-3 feels very possible, especially with all these guys returning and really kind of being bought in. They won, 3 out of the last 4 games. So really kind of finished strong at the end of the year. So, yeah, give me the over, Virginia Tech.
I'm mad. I just sent you a picture of what I thought was a leaked uniform, but it's not. It's someone took a picture of a Clemson uniform and decolored it and made it darker and added a Virginia Tech logo. And I was like, oh, these look pretty clean, but it's not.
You were duped.
I was duped. But I'm glad I found it before. I was like, I found the leaked image. Yeah, vibes alone, new uniforms. Look, the schedule's manageable. Number 1 team in returning production in the country. 9-3. I'm going over. Now, and this is with the schedule where you get Clemson and do they play Florida State? No, they don't.
No.
Sorry. Clemson and Miami. That's the other one.
Right.
Manageable out of conference schedule, even though 2 of those are on the road, which I'm not a fan of. I still think 9-3 for this team is extremely manageable. And look, you get one likely slip up from Miami, and you're in the ACC Championship. So big fan of that. It would be a cool season to see Georgia Tech do that. Virginia Tech, goodness. Last team, Wake Forest. Wake Forest coming in with a win total of 4.5. They have a tough out-of-conference schedule. Again, what are these teams doing? They need going over under 4.5.
Yeah. Again, they're circling this team, talking about this is the team that we can beat. These other ACC teams, obviously, they play Ole Miss. You mentioned that out-of-conference schedule. Louisiana is not going to be an easy game. I mean, it's just not – it doesn't add up. What are they trying to do? And then, yeah, that's anyways, all that to be said, I didn't realize Hank Bachmeier was still playing football. He's the quarterback from Boise State, transfers in to be QB1 here. I think he's going to flourish in the system. I guess Hank Bachmeier ended up at Louisiana Tech before he came to Wake Forest, but nonetheless, I think he's going to do well in this Dave Clawson system. It's just not going to amount to a lot in the win column. I think they're going to put up points, or they put up yards. I think they're going to, score with some folks, but it's just not quite what they need to get over that win total. So I'm going under for Wake Forest.
I'm going to go over simply because I always doubt Wake Forest, and they've proven me wrong, I think 3 or 4 years in a row.
Smart move.
I'll go. And the thing is, they've had a win total higher than this, though, where I've been like 7.5. I'm like, I don't get it. I'm like, no way. But at 4.5, yeah, 5-7 to miss a bowl game, absolutely. I'm a Wake Forest lover at this point. All in, 5-7. What a year. I'll go over for Wake Forest. Look, you could get a bowl game if you didn't schedule Ole Miss out of conference. That's a tough move there. Wake Forest wouldn't be doing that if I were you. Anyway, you can be sure to follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And you can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That'll do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.